Good afternoon. I'm pleased to have our 14th panel on the Maritime Transportation Data Initiative. It's a great panel today. I think those of the folks that are monitoring our progress are going to be very pleased. We've got a really good group of terminal operators representing a wide spectrum of interests. We did a terminal group last week. We have the best that we can have, and so I'm really pleased again to get your perspectives as a group on maritime transportation data and our initiative to see if we can establish national standards for the transmission of the sort of information to make the system more efficient and worthwhile, and so. It's really good. I believe that we have on Commissioner Max Vekic, who's our newest commissioner and just moving in. So we're really pleased. And if I see him, I'll wave him in, but I don't see him yet. Max, are you around? Okay. Well, Max is going to be listening in, and so we're welcoming him into the FMC today. So they have him doing a lot of different things, and I look forward to working with him in the future. I want to thank our participants for joining us today. We appreciate your time, and we're here to listen to you and your views. This process is for us to collect information to see if we can arrive at a way to standardize the sort of information that should be provided to the public. These meetings are being recorded and will be posted on the FMC YouTube page and on the Maritime Transportation Data Initiative MTDI webpage. Please, if one of the participants chooses to share something, use the share function for the public to be able to review. I want to point out that this is a live public meeting. Only the participants will be allowed to speak. We will be posting the meeting on the MTDI webpage for public access. However, we welcome and in fact would encourage public input. You can email us your feedback on data gaps and data needs at maritimedata@fmc.gov. Should you choose to submit public feedback, please reference whether it is in reference to an individual meeting or whether it is a general comment. Also, we will be posting submitted materials and comments on our webpage. I think we received something recently from the Department of Agriculture and on exports, so I hope to get that on the website pretty soon. We cannot post PowerPoint, so that we ask that the material be submitted in Word or PDF format. Please do not include any personal identifiable information, PII, on any submissions to the FMC. We will continue these meetings every Tuesday at 3 p.m. leading up to our FMC Transportation Data Initiative Summit this spring. We're going to be asking all of you to participate and to either remotely or in person, actually, as well. It's going to be June 1st, and so we value the time and energy you've spent on considering these questions and want to continue the process of working as we establish national standards for maritime transportation data. I'm looking forward to hearing each participant and questioning them afterwards. We've got, as I said, a really great panel, and what I'd like to do is we've sent materials to them in advance, questions, and just go through all of the questions in order, and I'll reference each one of you in turn, and we really want your impressions. So there may be some confluence of views, and just don't worry about that. It really helps us to get your unvarnished impression about what your views are on the level of maritime data that's out there, and an assessment of gaps and how it's used. We've got John Atkins, president of GCT USA, in New York City. I've had the opportunity to visit with him and see his terminal, and he's one of the true gentlemen and really a fantastic representative of the terminal industry. Richard Spone, is that it? Richard is with Seaboard Marine. He's the director of revenue analysis for Seaboard. TJ Rucker, we've also met in the past and talked about these issues with SSA Marine. He does a lot of their work on technology and maritime information. Griff Lynch, a good friend of mine. I hope I can say that without being a liar. He's the executive director for the Georgia Ports Authority. Has done a fantastic job in managing an incredible boom at that port, and they've really done fantastic work in moving cargo into the interior of our country and sustaining the people in the United States economically. I believe that terminal industry and the shipping industry has really been one of the underpinnings of our ability to get through this pandemic. We have Jose Alfredo Peto Martinez with data and analytics lead for APM Terminals, one of the leading shipping companies in the world, and their terminal, Maersk. And Christopher Calkins, Chief Executive Officer of the New Orleans Terminal. I actually went to school down there and I always enjoyed. I worked for Senator John Breaux, who's a senator from Louisiana. Spent a lot of time down there, and it's certainly fun and certainly important for maritime transportation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from the top to the bottom. And again, don't worry if there is some redundancy or play off the comments of others emphasize, but it's very helpful for us. We'll be using these recordings to assess and arrive at hopefully recommendations for maritime transportation data. With that, John, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Would you like me, Commissioner, just to go through the first topic and then everybody will come back to the second?
No, go ahead and go through all of the questions from your perspective, and then we'll turn it over to the others.
Okay, great. Thanks. So the first leading question, and one of the key data elements and data gaps that we see, most of what we use in data elements that are integral to our operations are through the EDI systems, the various communications that we get, whether it's the customs 309, booking information, way bills for rail, vessel plans, and schematic. Actually, we get via email, cargo releases, and the new and up and coming one is fee collection. We're also using API as a data element for fee collection, and that's becoming a more popular system that we're using in transaction that we use for going forward. On the export side, the key data elements that we're using that are integral to export is really the booking information that we get through EDI, customs, and the cargo releases to go to the vessel. As you could tell, these various transaction paths center around, of course, us being the MTO, we have the transactions with the carrier and the MTO, customs and the MTO, the rail providers and MTO, and we're using more and more we are communicating back to the trucker, shipper, and brokers as it pertains to appointments and some of the other items that we work on. One of the questions you asked here was, what data do you not currently have access to that would improve our overall, as the marine terminal operator, efficiency and performance? We're really looking through our supply chain partners to create more communication transparency and be proactive so we can be better with supply chain planning, whether it's what's coming at us off the ships as far out as possible, so we can better plan our yard space and what our hours and equipments would be, to the trucking side of our business, where we're relying on the truckers and the shippers and the BCOs to come in and what cargo they would like to get, particular by box number, which helps us stage and get more efficiency in our yard. So that's one of the elements that we would like to improve upon, that would help, again, not just our efficiency, but the overall supply chain. With that proactive planning, we can increase the service levels to the truckers, the customers, and also creating more port capacity and efficiency for the ocean carrier side of the business. What kind of terminal or what kind of data are we looking for in a more timely manner? Unsanitized customs data would enable us to facilitate a transition of the customs data from EDI into our warehousing. That would then allow us to be able to process that through APIs. With a lot of the data, or some of the data that we see sanitized, it's hard to get the level of detail, even from the shippers, when they're looking to create, whether it's peel piles or other particular cargo segregation. So that would be helpful. The ocean carrier shipment data under the 310 EDI, we're expected to provide alternative information to the custom 309s. Again, more level and granularity of detail. That way we get the BCO consignee destination in the form of transport out of them. Shipment pre-arrival data is another item that we would like to see more data in a timelier manner. And that includes everybody from the BCO to the consignee, trucker, and then it's helpful getting the local destination, but more importantly, the inland rail destination, as we're trying to create efficiency with our rail partners. And then any kind of customized shipment delivery plan that we're looking to get, we could work with the shippers to formulate. And then, of course, vessel location schedule data is always helpful as we move forward. As we get into the data transmission and access, the question was posed, how do you get the data you need from other parts of the supply chain? Again, most of what we get is from EDI or email, and the problems and inefficiencies that we have with that is at times, let's take EDI for example. In the EDI format, sometimes you have too much lagging data, not enough pushing data. There's too much data in a single EDI that you have to constantly sort through and pull out the pieces that you need. And anybody that's ever dealt with their IT group will tell you there's too many EDIs daily that places stress on the overall system. The bandwidth that you need to handle the EDIs is suffocating at times. And what we could all, I think, do better with most of this EDI data is it tends to be siloed right now. And it's better if we could create a centralization of access for the EDI data. So it's not just goes up the vertical for particular users. But again, I think we could all do a better job at that. Ideally, the supply chain would move to a service infrastructure model utilizing data warehouses, where the customized APIs from partners could pull only the information that's needed for each system. The MTO would create a centralized data warehouse solely for the operating system to pull information from and keep it running at full speed. This would allow the marrying of multiple data sets to extrapolate the useful data without bogging down your TOS system. And the customs data would be the first step to move away from the reliance on the 309 EDIs to a service infrastructure model utilizing the data warehouse. So there could be there's a lot of opportunities as we move forward with the EDIs. So last point on how do we provide data to our customers? Most of our data is sent to customers as event data for each shipment. For example, the 322 EDIs. We are moving more towards a portal access to the TOS, which we supply for shipment inquiries and reporting. We do that in New York, for example, both on a terminal level, but also the port, the MTOs in the port have developed a portal community for the entire port where it's one-stop shopping. Anybody that's looking to manage a shipment can go in through Port Truck Pass, and then they're able to delve off into the various terminals. So we're working both on a port-wide basis, not just on a terminal-wide basis, to make that easier for people to handle their shipments. Through that example on the port access for New York, we also are publishing vessel schedules so people can utilize one-stop shopping, and they can on one click see, especially now as you see more and more of these the VSAs crawling at multiple terminals in a port, they can track their shipments through one site. Also, we're using FTP and email reports. We are on a terminal basis to send equipment out to our customers, and then API calls that we're utilizing in New York through our Advent system. We're utilizing APIs to set up appointments, and also we're using API calls for fee collection, whether it's through Pay Cargo or the Advent system. So that's becoming a more broadly utilized program as we move forward. So that was a lot in a few minutes, but you know, I'll let you, any questions or anything you'd like to dissect, Chairman or Commissioner?
Yeah, that is great. We'll have to go through that one probably a couple of times just to extract the points that we want to get. But John actually is one of the major terminals in New York City, private terminal operator, one of the, I guess, 5 major ones there. And so we have a difference of our people that are presenting today have represent different perspectives. And so Griff is a state port authority, operating port authority, and we've got others as well. So Richard, why don't you take it from there? Seaboard, tell us a little bit about what a Seaboard does. I know the company, but it's got a particular, slightly different perspective on operations. So go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate the time as well. And yes, Seaboard Marine is actually an ocean vessel common carrier, obviously operating in 8 different ports in the United States, servicing a regional perspective, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean Basin. We also do operate 2 terminals, one in Miami and one in Houston, predominantly for our own services, but we also do provide additional services for some additional lines in the Houston area. And then we have to work with the various MTOs and the other terminals that we operate out of the United States and throughout the countries that we serve. APM is one of them that we utilize in Costa Rica. Obviously, we use Georgia Ports Authority for Savannah. So, you know, we have to become articulate in all of their own individual needs as we are as an ocean common carrier. And then in our own house, we fundamentally have our own legacy systems that fundamentally operate a form of a TOS, not very robust, but it is a form of a TOS. So when I looked at the questions, I'll try to be brief in my remarks, and a lot of them have been stated in a lot of the other presentations that I have listened to. But so the key data elements that are an integral part of our operations. For us, you know, 2 main drivers are locations in the customer master file that are key elements for that fundamentally drive other bill of lading components. From an MTO perspective, the date of vessel arrival, departure, motor carrier delivery pickup dates and time, stow plans, the BAPLI that was fundamentally mentioned just a moment ago, carrier release information and customs release information for the marine terminal operator become critical components to improving the velocity through a marine terminal. Obviously of big interest, especially over the last 1.5 years, has been the terminal free time and assessment of terminal storage, which is also very important. And that communication, I think, can be greatly improved. We have to have integration with all the partners throughout the supply chain. And I know you're trying to achieve some form of a common language. And I think that's going to be essential when you work with multiple terminals throughout the United States and obviously multiple terminals in the countries that you serve, right? Moving on to the second question, which was when we export, what are the key data elements that are integral to our export? Our key data elements include the earliest arrival dates for the MTO perspective, the earliest arrival date, motor carrier scheduling or appointments, container in-gate confirmations, and gross container weights. Obviously, that's going to affect stow plans on a vessel operator and how the stevedoring is going to work. Export cargo has some different requirements for data. There's a difference between the ACE data components and those of the AMS for import shipments. So improving the communication between the shipper, the motor carrier, the ocean carrier, and the terminal related to these key data elements is very critical. Just obtaining a better visibility, as I said, under a common language as to when cargo is going to arrive at a terminal will be a huge improvement. One of the other things that we see that obviously causes bottlenecks is resolution holds. When you're lacking some of the information that you need in order to be able to in-gate a container or allow a truck to come in and pick up a container. In terms of improving terminal turnaround times for motor carriers, the data flow between the shipper, the motor carrier, and the terminal is crucial. We often see these bottlenecks and they end up in resolution lanes and take customer service representatives to try to resolve the problem so that the container can either be delivered into the terminal or cargo can be picked up. So the lack of timely voyage vessel information, POD, destination, hazardous data, and various other documentation are just a few examples of the data that need to be timely and accurate for optimal gate experience. And I know we just previously discussed, the quick turnaround at a gate, which is critical. You don't want to have gates backed up, and having the necessary information readily available will help improve those gate turn times. So what data do we not currently have access to that would improve our efficiency and performance? I think, for us, we don't really have any scheduled arrival and appointments for the terminal delivery pickup or the rail connections. And that's an area that we need to focus on getting some improvement. The ability to ingest terminal storage information when free time ends would be very useful for both the ocean carrier as well as the shipper. Standardization of terms like the earliest return date, demurrage, detention, terminal storage would also be a huge improvement. We use this term loosely about per diem, and many people don't really, understand what that generally means, whether that's demurrage, detention, or terminal storage. The data transmission and access, how do we communicate with other parts of the supply chain? As an ocean carrier, we receive or send information using multiple platforms, including EDI, whether it's Edifact or ANSI. We use APIs, we use email. There is direct telephone contact with customers where we have to complete the information in the legacy system. And we have our own web application or interface with our customers that they can go to. And somewhat that may be a little bit problematic with everybody having to run their own websites and the communication of information on multiple websites. Makes it, I think, difficult in terms of managing multiple terminals. Each terminal has their own terminal operating system. We've talked about that a little bit, and shippers have their own unique ordering system. So the communication must be uniquely set up, which creates inefficiencies. In addition, each terminal operator shipper have their own interpretation of what data elements are required and their unique definition of those terms. So it's often difficult to identify the right communication channel to get the required information to the right individual that's going to be consuming that data. How do we provide data to our customers? I think I've mentioned the multiple platforms that we operate in, both as an ocean carrier and a marine terminal operator. We must cater to many different communications requirements and data integration methods that are kind of set up by the marine terminal operators themselves or set up by the shippers and how they need to have information communicated to them. So the setup and the maintenance of these data communications without a standard language across the supply chain is it's a major challenge. So I hope that's a good summary.
That is a very good summary, Richard. Thank you very much. And you give a sort of a unique perspective as a regional carrier that does terminal operations and vessel operations. And so you can't favor one side or the other of the equation. And,
Thank you.
Hey, Carl, just wanted to let you know that we have Commissioner Max Beckich here. He's having some computer issues with his computer, so he's commandeered Nicole's.
Yeah, so I did recognize you earlier, Max. As I said, we're in position so that we can use Morse code between the offices and pound on each other's doors. And so I'm glad you could sit in, and I'll after we get through our participants, see if you want to ask any questions or participate otherwise. But it's great to have you here at the FMC, and we're really excited. I think there was a lot of energy around the hallways of the 10th floor here today. So thank you for being here. Next up is TJ Rucker, SSA Marine. Commissioner Vekic is very well versed with SSA Marine and spent probably a lot of time on terminals that out there in the past. TJ is the person that deals with all of their technology issues, and so TJ, why don't you go ahead?
Great, thanks, Carl. Yeah, as Carl mentioned, Thomas Rucker, most people just call me TJ, so that'll work. I do head up technology for Carix and its brand of companies. So SSA Marine, SSA International, and other business units in the portfolio. So we certainly appreciate the opportunity to add our 2 cents. Just jumping in on the first topic here, key data elements and data gaps. I think in general terms, like most marine terminal operators, we leverage a variety of upstream and downstream data from shipping lines, CBP, motor carriers, and for manifest bookings, waybills, BOLs, EDI, and API, amongst all that, all in an effort to plan our inbound and outbound activity throughout the terminal. This includes data to help us plan, organize vessel activity, yard strategy, asset optimization, and staging for import gate related activity. We leverage data and executional tool sets that are offered by a couple of community systems, port community systems that we use, one that's a little bit more commercial and one that we've built internally here at SSA Marine. And of course, both of those are tightly integrated into the TOS. And even to some extent, some hybrid, I'd call it hybrid data approaches where, partial system, partial manual, but, we work really closely with our community to help off with peel off piles, medical supply needs, in the light of the pandemic and other urgent cargo requirements. On the export side, to the second part of that topic one, the booking is the main dating component, obviously, but also accurate and timely pre-advice and appointment information is really important for us. When we get that from our community, it allows us to optimize our gate and yard operations for motor carriers. Accurate pre-advice and appointment system maintenance from a port community system member is key. I think as with most terminals, there's a bit of an art form to managing appointment systems. And so balancing good service against measure to help, guide and model behavior throughout the supply chain to help optimize those assets throughout is certainly something that's in focus for us. So ensuring that we work with our motor carrier and shipping community to supply data is critical, of course, on the export side of the equation.
Well, I think we're back up, so go ahead. We'll see if there's a gap in the tape.
Yeah, sounds like somebody didn't like something I said there.
Right, no, it's like the Nixon tapes, Watergate. So
there we go.
So go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So improving efficiency and performance. I think we believe understanding the demand side of the equation is important, especially in the middle mile market. I think there's an opportunity there to improve performance, not only for the MTO, the marine terminal operator, but also all the players up and down the middle mile market there. So more on the post-gate activity or the demand side of the equation, getting access to such things as empty inventories, warehouse density information, and off-dock truck yards, I think would go a long way. If, for example, if we knew there was a company that had 100 empty containers sitting on wheels, MTOs and other community members could help coordinate and get those back on terminal. I think recently there were probably some issues given all the congestions where some terminals couldn't track empties, but generally speaking, I think it's in everybody's interest to keep these assets flowing, and visibility would be a benefit back to the MTO, who's certainly eager to get those back into the system to help cargo flow. Like a marine terminal operator, when their yard hits certain density levels, cargo naturally slows down a little bit. You're digging out containers, there's too many rehandles, and this can quickly become, a yard management nightmare. So any of those that have sat behind a toss and tried to plan a yard when you've got high density levels, it's surely a difficult thing to handle. But I think the same happens when warehouse capacity starts to rise too. So once they fill up, of course, they start seeing some of the same issues. So you can almost imagine a future where something like an advanced drayage notification could help create a more fluid system. So if you take these shippers, and I think folks are touching on this on the edges a little bit, but you take shippers, BCOs, logistics service providers, they could assist marine terminal operators when they want that cargo. Do they want it immediately? Do they want it in 3 days, 7 days? What's really critical and non-critical to them? I think this would allow marine terminal operators to better optimize their system, plan out resources, improve yard strategies, and better align with shippers' resources. So very similar to a supply and demand problem that we see, play out in a lot of industries. So more of a demand-driven approach rather than terminals having to manually manage peel-offs, which, these are steps in the right direction, I think, for everybody, and we're all trying them to some extent, but most are managed by a person. They're a little prone to error and require certain economies to make it work, right? You need to find 50 boxes for that shipper, 100 boxes for that shipper to make these piles work. So I think a few of us are stitching systems and process together, but the fact remains it's still a very small percentage of the overall volume that's actually being delivered through peel-off. I was listening to the previous one, and some had mentioned that mining data from manifests and things like this, which I also think is a great idea to inform stacking strategies and improve import flow. So while I agree in principle, it's a right step, it's a good step in the right direction. It does require more complex data management and perhaps even more advanced systems. You think of AI, things of this nature, trying to reduce, rehandles and things like this. Of course, we all want our containers to find, the final rest before they're touched again. But a lot of times, a lot of us are deploying yard gangs at night, in order to kind of marshal these containers into a more fluid location. So I always tell people terminals are not a buffet at the Bellagio. You only have so much real estate here, and you need to optimize these assets and move this cargo quickly. So maybe just a few comments there. Data transmission and access, so how do you get the data from that you need from other parts of the supply chain? Edifact, ANSI type EDI messages, very common, same thing here. To and from the shipping line, CBP manifests. We also use a handful of API connectors on our side, and frankly, we even have some legacy flat files, which I promised a couple of people I wouldn't admit in public, but there you go. With EDI, naturally, I think there's some level of management with that system. You hear this a lot, but ensuring your mapping is current between your terminal and your terminal operating systems and EDI systems can, be a bit of a maintenance nightmare. And shipping lines are always wanting to upgrade their EDI sets, and you have to be able to turn that pretty quickly and test it. And so there's just a lot that's involved with that. The delays and transitions are very inherent just to the nature of EDI. I mean, I think generally speaking, you have to batch up a series of, processed components, and you wait a certain amount of time and then you fire them off. And And I think in this dynamic day and age, everybody's turning towards APIs, which make a lot more sense. It's a much quicker turnaround of data. And in some cases, we're actually still receiving emails. And until recently, many people on this call probably remember receiving BAPLI files on USB sticks. And so, of course, a lot of the cyber threats have certainly taught us some lessons there. So don't grab a USB stick and stick it into your computer any longer, or otherwise you might end up on the front page of the JOC. But how do you provide data to your customers? Once again, EDI, we have community systems, some flat files, emails, and even some phone calls from time to time. But mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we use a couple of port community systems that provide a variety of reporting, notification alerts, lookup tools. We also give access to vessel schedules, watch lists, and other tools that help the community manage their cargo. And so, yeah, we believe data standards would benefit the entire industry. Increasing the interoperability of the entire system is a great effort. And I do think there are some organizations out there right now developing standards. I think generally with those I speak to, that membership can be a bit narrow at times and focused on certain segments. So we believe, any effort in data standards needs to incorporate all players. So you have kind of a full industry representation, pretty important. So that's kind of the end of my comments, I guess. I appreciate the opportunity to share. So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you, Carl.
Thanks, TJ. That was great. And I did want to mention something that you referenced. We were having problems getting healthcare products in because of the volumes, and your company, SSA, or the company that you're part of, stepped up to the plate to try to track and identify this cargo and move it through. I've also worked with Griff and Savannah, and the industry sometimes in times of congestion we sort of jump them a little bit and say, hey, how it's really bad. Usually it's because there's so much cargo coming in, or there's been some catastrophic event that's really precipitated this. But my experience is when they had a problem, they, as an industry group, they were willing to step up to the plate and do whatever they could, acknowledging, and it should be an acknowledgement of the huge importance of the industry. And so you brought that up, and I did want to thank you and SSA for stepping up to the plate to help try to do what they can to move that cargo. And so we've got Griff Lynch up next, and he has a sort of a different perspective as well. He's a port authority and also a port operator, and probably has as wide a perspective as anyone here on operations through the system. Georgia Ports Authority have inland terminals and pop-up intermodal facilities, and so data is something that they need to manage very well with the breadth of that. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Griff.
Okay, Carl, thank you. I'm not going to go into as much detail because I can't. Okay. And I don't have the knowledge that some of these folks have, but I'm going to tell you that essentially, just kind of high level, when we think about communication and data, we're communicating with ocean carriers, federal agencies like Customs, like some folks have said, railroads, beneficial cargo owners, and truckers. And we're doing that through EDI. We're doing that through web-based products, like with our trucking community, making PIN numbers to pre-register. We're doing that through data that we buy, railroad data, so that we can track we can only buy our railroad data, but we buy data so that we can see what happens inland, and we can be communicating directly with the BCOs. And so we're trying to reach into the BCOs more than we ever have before. So we kind of streamline that communication, and we find that's very helpful. But one of the things that just to answer that first question, in addition to that, is that at the very most basic principle is just a reliable vessel schedule. Okay, that seems to be probably one of the most difficult things that we have, and that triggers everything from there. whether it's imports coming in or exports going out. So that's kind of what, and I'll just take that into the next question, which is the exports. The reliable vessel schedule kind of helps us set the begin receive date or the early receive date that some others have mentioned. And where there's the most frustration, I think, from the exporters is we can't get that right if we don't have an accurate vessel schedule. And so I think that terminals are establishing a vessel schedule and trying to do the best they can to keep up with that. And then the carriers are doing that to some degree, but they've got a lot of ships and a lot of ports, and maybe it doesn't get updated. And so there needs to be better continuity with the vessel schedules as that goes. So to the extent that we can improve that, on the export side, what are the key data elements for that? So the vessel schedule triggers it, but the next thing is valid booking numbers for the exports with accurate box counts. I'm going to keep this really simple. I mean, these are simple things to ask for, but cause a lot of problems on the terminal. And then when a container is booked for a vessel, it would be nice that the box actually loaded on the vessel. Okay, so that's not happening. All right. And then when it gets rolled, where's it getting rolled to? We have something called NIL, NIL, and because they may not know exactly what ship they want to roll it to. So it gets held in a NIL status. So what's the plan when a container doesn't make it onto the vessel? Where's it going to go so that the terminal can take action and say, all right, we're going to put it here because we know it's going to go on a vessel 2 weeks from now, whatever it might be, and it's going to this port. What data do you not currently have that would improve your efficiency? I think exception management is the big thing for all of us because you can't kind of foresee all the details that are coming. So as I said, when things don't load, what's going to happen? I think that the ocean carriers and the terminals to match cutoff times. So that data of, because that is causing, I've had probably 3 or 4 phone calls with exporters this week complaining about that very thing. We have a cutoff and they have a cutoff and they're not aligned. So we may give 9 days to receive, but it turns out to be only 4 days because the ocean carrier, cuts the container off 5 days before the vessel arrives. So and that's just because they're not doing that on purpose, I don't think. I think it's more because the maintaining the systems that they have. So that predictability and visibility and leads will come from transparency. So how do you get the data you need from other parts of the supply chain? We kind of went through that. Most of it, I've heard it's the same as what has been described here. Most of it's EDI for us. We do have, as I said, web-based systems, could take phone calls. When we're talking to BCOs, one of the interesting things that's happened with our pop-up yards is we're going directly to the BCO now. And so what's really neat is when BCOs say, hey, we have cargo coming to you that's going to be there a really long time. So it's going to age, just we know that already. So we want to get it to a pop-up yard and here's the cargo. They'll send us a spreadsheet. Okay, then we will then put that in and get it off to a pop-up yard and get it off the facility. That's something that never happened before. And I know that all terminals struggle with this. So the extent that we can identify that cargo in advance would be great. I don't know that many ports, I hadn't seen this in many terminals that I've worked in, but the Georgia ports has a tagging program for imports, but it's voluntary. So big BCOs will use the tagging program so that we can see what's coming off and who's this. If it's customer A, we'll group them or set up virtual peel piles and do a lot of customized service for them. Not everybody uses it. And the more that use it, once they do, they love it. But getting them to be more transparent, the BCO is sometimes challenging and difficult. But the same is true from the export side. I've heard, many on the phone say already, if we could just have advanced notice when cargo is coming and whose cargo it is and what's inside the cargo. All we see is the booking number. And it both import and export, we don't know what the cargo is unless it's tagged in some way. So we got to get that up. And that's something that I think all terminals could benefit from. And then how do you provide data to your customers? Yeah, and the same as everyone else, reports, emails, EDI, phone calls, whatever it takes. And I'll just say that as I wrap up, we tried to get access to rail data. I heard somebody mention it, I forget who it was, several years back, and we could not get it. So the only way we could get it was to find a third party that we could buy it from. So it was a fairly large expense that I ended up, agreeing to with my team, and it's paid off in a big way, because we can then not only predict what's happening on our facility, but after we load the cargo onto the train, and if it's going inland, we can watch the cargo there and see, okay, how long did it take to get picked up? Why isn't the cargo getting picked up? And if it's not, is it a chassis issue? Is it a notification issue? Whatever it might be, because at the end of the day, even if it's rail cargo that's sitting in Memphis, and if our customer inland has a problem with it, who do they blame? Us. Okay, so knowing what's happening through the supply chain, even after it leaves the terminal, is really important to us. Now we're watching that. We can do that with rail. We can't really do that with truck. So, Carl, those are our kind of high level view of the world.
That was great. Yeah, no, it's fine. Everyone's perspective is valid and helpful. So we're going to be looking at all these tapes and cross-indexing all the comments and evaluating it. So we've got Jose. I think you're up next. Why don't you give us your perspective?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Benzel, to invite to this meeting. I will try to speak a little fast because, but the idea. Let me introduce a little about the APM terminals. We're a world-class terminal operator presenting 76 key locations that represent to be in 42 countries. We are more than 22,000 professionals focusing delivering the operational excellence and solution with our 10,000 of customers that require our services. In North America region, we administrate 5 terminals, one in Los Angeles, Port Elizabeth, New Jersey, Miami, with minority share, Mobile, and Lázaro Cárdenas, that is located in Mexico. We is part of our region, North America region, in our group. All this region can handle around the 6.9 million TEUs capacity, and we have 4,400 employees in North American region. Respect to the topics 1, key elements and data gaps. What are the key data elements that are integral to your operation? Okay, obviously it's necessary the information to process any information, any data is necessary. For example, one of the important data that we consider key is the consignee information, the cargo information too, the shipping information, and all the rest of data that is requested by the authority has manifest, contain number, ISO, weight, package type of packaging, loading port, vessel, etc., etc. Many of are mentioned before. The merchandise value is very important for us, but other key important piece of this is not the data, is the time. For example, the time. For example, having many of these key data on time before could produce a different result in our operation. Obviously, this is not data. It's only a particular characteristic that need to be the information to have on time. Okay, respect the next question. What's the key data element that are integral to export? Okay, it's similar to the first question. Only we can add some additional information that happened during the process that we are processing the container information inside our terminal. For example, the custom delivery confirmation, the book and delivery confirmation by the shipping line, and delivered whole pending payment by the terminal too. This is additional information that is generating during the oil container cargo is inside our terminal. So that's are basic to have a good an integral export process exportation. What data do you not currently have access that would improve your efficiency and performance? Really, today we have access to the necessary information. Yes, because with all this information, we can execute our work process. I think the difference could be represented in how we are accessing to this data. For example, I want to mention that it's possible to have the different data information, but for example, there are data that are not the appropriate format, for example, and that represents some challenge to process them. And second, there are others that even they are in the correct format, but the order in we are available could be improved. For example, maybe for us it's necessary to have first and not in the third or the fourth step, for example. And third, there is data that has in the correct format, is in the correct order of the availability. However, maybe it's necessary to change how we are using the technology in order to be available. For example, the container number, the seal, are data that is basic information, and we have electronically always, but maybe it's necessary to move to other kind of technology that let us to have more availability in other availability way, for example. And finally, the ideal proposal is that the data must fulfill the following: data available in suitable format, data available in the proper sequences of our process, data available with anticipated time, data accuracy, and finally to have the availability in of some key data in using some technology that we are currently exist to take better advantage of them. Respect to the data transmission, how do you get the data you need from other parts of the supply chain? The data normally we receive from different sources and use different technology, such EDI, for example, is the basic technology that we are using to interchange information between the shipping lines and the terminal operator. XML format, Excel, PDF, email, and sometimes manual information that they, for example, they need to enter or input in our web page, for example. Does this create inefficiency? For example, the different methods mentioned, of course, some have pros and cons each other, and some are preferable to use than others. However, we have adapted to methods that may represent a challenge using IT technology in order to take advantage of them. We are flexible and provide data solution to our customer. For example, for customer data input, our customer provide us through web portal. We're applying, for example, RPA and OCR process or technology process in order to obtain the information, transform that information that is located in some format, transform to other format. How do you provide data to your customer? Okay, we repeat a little the answer. The EDI is the one of the formats we are using to transmit that information to our customer. We receive for this method, and we share for this method too the web portal, API, email, SMS, alerts, Excel. And I think that's all. EDI and API are more is focusing for sophisticated customer. Maybe they need to invest more budget. And however, we have other methods for any other client or customer that don't have enough budget, like a web portal, email, SMS, Excel, etc., etc.
Well, thanks, Jose. Chris Calkins, sorry, we're probably going to be going a little later because we've got the panelists that we have, the number of panelists. So go ahead and tell us, summarize your views on the data, and I hope things are going well in New Orleans. I know they're looking at a new container terminal there that's sort of exciting, and so anyhow, just go ahead.
Most definitely. Thank you. If I could say what they said, they'd probably cover everything what I'm about to say, but here you go, just the same. EDI is basically the primary communication channel that we have with the ocean carriers and the EIPs. One of the bigger issues, I'm going to skip around here a little bit. So
okay, that's okay. Go ahead.
Just to break things up a little bit so nobody falls on me. One of the bigger things we see are schedule integrities and getting accurate scheduling information. That causes a backlog for the export bookings to be able to be accepted into the systems. But with that on the import side, there was 1, 2, 3 issues, I think last year where customs had issues with their EDI system. Since we're secondary notified, we weren't getting the releases timely. But also with the import side, sometimes EDIs come in unorganized. So they go ahead and send in carriers send in the EDI for a manifest, but then they do a manifest delete, then try to do another one, then do another delete. So if it's even off by a second, even though it's supposed to have been a manifest delete, then the manifest, it'll go ahead and it's off by a second, it'll reverse itself and delete it. And then we're kind of stuck waiting for them to retransmit the whole thing. But for the exports, we get the standard information, booking, site, vessel, ports of discharge, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the one thing that we are different compared to other terminals is that New Orleans as a whole have been doing pre-gate or pre-appointments since 2003. In order for any type of truckers to do anything, the booking has to be in, has to be open for receiving, and has to be allowing for additional export containers to be received in. So if it's booked for like 10 high cubes, it's got to have at least one empty space in there to receive the 10th high cube. Otherwise, it'll get a type of error message saying, please contact the carrier. The booking is full, or it's outside the receiving windows, things of that nature. Where else are we here? Enhanced vessel schedule data from all the carriers. That seems to be the latest and greatest problem that we're running into. So we don't get the information. That information usually comes via email, legacy systems, if you would. But even still, if we can get it any which way, I mean, any which way we possibly could, we can get it in the system easier with a little bit of a better forecast. Now, I just happened to get off another call about data transmissions and visibility not less than an hour ago. And on the West Coast, it's easy that they have a better idea when the container vessels are coming in. New Orleans is kind of stuck between Houston and Mobile. And the vessels usually go to Houston, then come to New Orleans. Well, if there's a delay in Houston, it's going to delay New Orleans. And you're only talking about 24-hour transit. So that's one of our bigger problems that we have to get into. And especially right now, and Richard, I know you're shaking your head because I think Jacinto Port and Bayport got fog this morning, or they're expecting fog today and tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, which is going to mess everybody up, especially in New Orleans. And we're just sitting here trying to figure out, okay, when are we going to get the vessels in? What else are we at? How do you get the data you need from other supply chain? Again, primarily it's EDI. Now, even though we get all the primary data from the ocean carriers and the EIPs, via EDIs. I'd have to say about 90% of it is through the EDI systems. The other 10% is through emails, BAPLEs, things of that nature. We also have a web portal that the ocean carriers can go into and update their own bookings if nothing's been received in. And also the BCOs, the NVOCCs, the freight forwarders, and the truckers. They can go into our web portal to check to see is the booking there? When is it opened up? For the imports, is it cleared? Is a line released? And that's also the same system they go in to make their appointments in as well, or the truckers make their appointments in as well. Again, lag time, custom EDI issues, that's the bunching. We may get a 1C from customs, and then 30 seconds later might get a hold on it where the hold's supposed to have been before the 1C. But our TOS system only looks at the very last one, so then it causes a bit of an issue for release and everything else. And same for the exports. It's just it's just the order, if we can get the information quicker, cleaner, and more organized, it would alleviate a lot of the problems. That's about as short and sweet as I can get. Everybody else pretty much.
Yeah, that's okay. Don't worry about that, Chris. Really, it's helpful to hear it on multiple occasions from multiple players. So we're going to use this as a tool to try to call through and go through all these data elements. So John, I think both you and Griff, if we still got them, and Chris all mentioned some of the challenges you're having getting information about vessel arrivals, and you know, it's just still amazing to me that we're in a position where these ships are not moving that fast, and it takes a long time to get between ports, and the information we're getting is by email with status. And I know that there's efforts. You know, when I have to look at a vessel, I go on to one of 6 websites, and I can pretty much identify that it's out there. And you can't really tell, you know, that much more other than there's an arrow that's showing the direction. But it seems that we don't really have any information about status. You know, estimated time of arrival, estimated berthing time, you know, ERD data in terms of the vessels. So wanted to talk, get your views. So I guess I'll start with John and Griff. So it's sort of amazing that we're not better positioned. When you go into an airport, you can get it. You'll know to the minute when your airplane's going to touch down, more or less, and you know when you're going to arrive when you get on the airplane. But we're talking things that are going, you know, 15 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour at best, and going massive distances. So why aren't we better positioned to have a sort of common operating picture on the status of vessels coming into U.S. ports?
I think this issue really gets amplified more, Carl, when you see a bunching of vessels. You may have the same alliance, it may have 3 or 4 vessels that are at anchorage or bunching together, and they go through their decision matrix partially outside the MTO of which vessel they would like to show some priority to. So that's what we're seeing of late, or, you know, let's say the last 6 to 8 months. So, you know, it's when they start to stack up that vessels start to get out of sequence, and the carriers, or VSAs really, not the individual carrier, has to decide which one to bring in. And, you know, once that's decided, then it's communicated, but that's really the bigger issue that we're seeing more and more of.
It's a little different in Georgia. I know exactly what John's talking about. And you know, it's true. When you're in a port with many terminals or multiple terminals, it's even more challenging, right? New York or LA, Long Beach. In Georgia, we have essentially one major facility, so we're kind of controlling the flow. But nonetheless, when we had a backup of ships right before Christmas, our customers were getting frustrated, and they didn't know when the ship was working, what was going to happen, and so we did, the reason is, Carl, we got one ship over here that's on pro forma or on schedule, and another one that's a couple days late. And, you know, what do we do, right? Because, and as John said, they're all coming at the same time. So if everything stayed on time, it wouldn't be as bad. But what we ultimately decided, and it made it a lot better, and I think we had agreement from the customers on this, was we're just going to work them in the order that they arrive. So, and we use technology to set that up. We've set up geofencing around our port. And when a vessel comes into that zone, they get that, you know, the next ticket, right? And so we take that information and we post it on our website twice a day. It's on there all the time, but it's updated several times a day. And first thing in the morning, you can go online and say, okay, this is how many ships are at anchor. This is the ships that are sailing, when they're going to sail, and what's next and what's after that. So it's provided a lot more predictability. The problem we had goes back to what Chris said. We have ports that are very close to us. And if they're not employing the same system, and that ship's going to sail from their port and it's going to be in the GPA in the next 24 hours, we don't have time to get all those things aligned. So we don't know the order that they're going to work in the vessels. I think one thing that would help is, in an environment like we're in, all the ports communicated exactly when they're going to work each ship, or the order of the vessels. Not exactly. It's tough to, just know exactly when because of different parameters. But if we're all communicating that, it gives the entire supply chain a better predictability, right? And that's something that is a problem right now. So not everybody's embraced the same system.
But and I agree, and I think that's in part what we're trying to come up with is some answers here. But you're still having to reach out and look to your geofence. That's the first point you get, as opposed to having the carrier provide probably the best real-time information that you could get would be, okay, they sort of know when they're going to be coming into berth. They know what the order is and the priorities and what the system is. So it's still, it depends on who should have an obligation. And Chris, I think did you want to say something?
Yes, sir. I mean, I'm not going to speak for other MTOs here, but for New Orleans, the carriers try to give us as much up-to-date information as humanly possible. Now things happen. Let's just say, okay, last Sunday, we were expecting vessels A, B, and C. Well, if anybody can predict the weather, please introduce them to me, because I'd love to see it. Apparently every Tuesday now here for the last 3 weeks is Tornado Tuesday instead of Taco Tuesday.
Right.
They try to give us as much accurate information as quickly as possible once a day. And with that, nobody could predict that Houston's going to have fog coming in. Well, that's going to delay it. The size of vessels delaying it. What if they had Houston Port Authority had an equipment breakdown? There's a lot of multiple variables into it, which makes it a little bit interesting that we got to fly by the cuff. Now, to use your analogy about the airplane, that's easy because you're only going from point A to point B.
Right.
But if you had an airplane going from say LA to New York with a stop in Utah, Dallas, and Chicago, I'm sure your ETA to New York could be a whole lot different because you don't know what other delays you're going to have at those other transshipment hubs, if you would.
Well, they do some of that. You're right, but it's more complexity in the maritime environment. But it always strikes me that it's they're in a better position. A lot of these questions on data is who's in the best position to provide the best data. In my view, if it's a terminal and the terminal and the shipping line are both providing information about status of cargo and the terminal, maybe that's the wrong thing because it's the terminal that's in control of and moving the cargo and knows more or less more than anyone else. So isn't this part of the equation? Who should be providing the information at different points?
Well, Commissioner, one thing I'd like to say and give kudos to a carrier, but you're right on that. But we were all talking about cutoff dates and receiving dates, and one of the carriers, and credit to Maersk Line, had said, okay, from now on, we are going to, whatever the cutoff is for the terminal, that's the cutoff we're going to use. So they married the cutoff. We want to see all the ocean carriers do that. So the terminals want to control that because they're doing a better job of watching the vessels and knowing which vessels coming in to their port. But as it relates to, you know, when and how and the order that the vessels work, obviously there's a lot of complexity to that, and a lot of terminals have different processes, you know. So, but that cutoff time for an exporter is critical. And if ocean carriers could line up with the terminals, that I think would go a long way towards mitigating some of the impacts there.
You know, Commissioner Dye is looking at this very issue, and so we're gonna see if we can rope her in to talk about the ERD issue and when you know, commitments should be made to provide information for the benefit of exporters. I think it's critical to ensure issues. So I think Griff, to you, this is to you. I mean, clearly you're looking at trying to, and probably to John as well, and probably TJ as well. But we're seeing more efforts to expedite cargo through ports, peel piles, you know, setting up inland rail terminus that can be utilized. But it seems like you still have to have a pretty good information. One, on the availability of the type of cargo to move, and I think Richard, you mentioned this, you know, marshaling cargo. So if we can come up with information, what sort of information do you get from these facilities? I mean, your own are your own, but distribution centers. You have a lot of big distribution centers that you provide service to. Do you know when they're open, when you can move cargo out of the complex into the next destination, or is this just sheer guesswork?
Well, as it relates to the inland ports and the pop-up locations, we're developing a much better knowledge. That's a real small percentage of the overall cargo. So everything else, though, I think you'd hear, you know, there's appointment systems out there, but literally those are set up on the day of or the day prior, and that's not that helpful. So the truth is that you know, 6 months ago we had a 12-day dwell time for imports, which is 2 to 3 times longer than normal, and today we have the same thing. But the information we need from BCO is, this is going to be a short dwell, this is going to be a medium dwell, and this is going to be long dwell. If we could just get there, don't even tell me the exact, okay, this is going to be about a week, this one's going to be 2 weeks, and this one's going to be 20 days or longer, 30 days. And then the terminals can go about doing things to maybe isolate cargo that's longer term, put it together, save space with it, block stow it in the yard, or if you have an alternative site, get it off location. The problem we're having is, if we don't have a pop-up yard or an additional facility where we can ground the container, they're taking the freight off to avoid demurrage charges, storing it on a chassis on some lot somewhere, and then we lose the chassis. And now we're even more handicapped than we were before, because we can't move the other cargo that wants to move. So it's just this, it's a snowball effect. But yeah, you're asking what kind of information. If we could get a better dialogue of whose freight is coming into us and how long it's going to be on terminal, their best guess, that would help us, right? I don't know if the others agree, but.
Well, Commissioner, I'll also address your question directly about distribution centers and warehouses. Today, the most modern technology for trying to figure out an appointment for a distribution center is a telephone call. Dispatch to the warehouse to find out whether or not they have space and availability to accept the container and get it discharged timely. So, you know, there needs to be work on, especially the large distribution centers, hours of operation, scheduling appointments, interfaces between the terminal operators, the carriers, the motor carriers, so that they can better determine how fast they can make a delivery off of a terminal.
Yeah, no, it's they have an obligation here too, as well, to be part of the chain, and they manage their own transportation resources, and they're all part of the same complex. So I agree completely that we need to do better here with those that are going to be recipients. I have just one last question, actually. TJ and Jose wanted to I think, TJ, you mentioned the fleet of assets that's available for wheels, and equipment. And this is a problem throughout the chain, the supply chain. But can we do a better job of jointly in certain areas keeping track of driver availability and equipment availability for movement of cargo, and what do we have to step in and provide some incentives so that someone is keeping an eye out on the supply of equipment needed at all of these facilities for the movement of cargo from the terminal or the rail terminal or someplace to get it to those terminals. So thoughts on that issue, and it seems like this is a gap area. I pretty much know where things are in the terminal. You pretty much know where the ship is with some variances on real time, but the availability of equipment to move it from these complexes. What can we do better here?
Yeah, I think it's a great comment, Carl. A lot of people say it's a supply chain problem. I often argue that it's an asset chain problem, because when these things are not moving naturally, you get clogged up like that. But yeah, as I mentioned before, any indicators that kind of the post gate activity, middle mile market can communicate back to MTOs just on asset levels, we can match that up with what we've got, versus what's discharging, and you can see those deficits. So if there's some way to subscribe or whatever the case might be to some data source that kind of gives you a broad brush view on how many chassis are out there versus what you got in the terminal, I think that would be a huge first step, in my opinion.
Jose? You're on mute right now.
Yes, totally agree. Normally the equipment is the key when you can have some bottleneck inside the terminal. When we are talking of chassis, we depend on the quantity that we can provide inside the terminal. Obviously, the idea here is to try to identify what is the demand and what is the resources that we are having. And in that sense, we have a balance. If it's needed to have more, okay, acquire more, but it's not needed because it is something that we in one terminal is something we are identifying or is the challenge. How much equipment do you need to have, but at the same time it's necessary not to maintain stop it, because with one equipment is stopped, you are losing money in that sense. So the idea is to maintain the majority of the time moving, and maybe it's not an issue too easy to solve, but normally the terminal paying attention in this to try this balance.
Well, I want to just jump in, Carl. We need to.
Before we go,
we'll be off by it.
One thing I wanted to say is, hey, Griff, you're right about the rail issues. I've been talking to the railroads, and we need to utilize intermodal rail to alleviate congestion. So better awareness of where they are in the system. They have information. The fact that you had to buy it separately from the private sector is sort of amazing. But yeah, we got to go there. So I want to thank everyone for participating. On June 1st, we are going to be having a public meeting here at the FMC. We're doing it in person for people. You're all invited. Everybody who's been part of the Maritime Transportation Data Initiative will be invited, and it can be in person or it can be online. So we're trying to set things up, and we're going to go through the tapes of everybody and all the comments they've meant, try to digest it, and come up with recommendations for the larger group to review at that point. And so we'll take comments on our work product and suggestions for further modifications. So great panel today, really good experts. Appreciate that you took the time to do this, and it will be something that we'll review again to come up with hopefully a maritime transportation data standards and national standard for transportation. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it once again. And with that, the 14th session of the MTDI is over.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. See you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.